Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're looking at something that is basically going to challenge a very fundamental assumption we all have about human anatomy. We tend to think of the brain as this highly protected, physically isolated command center, right? Locked away in a bony vault, completely walled off from the everyday squishing and stretching of our muscles. But, well, it turns out our brains might not be nearly as isolated as we've been led to believe.
So, is your brain really isolated inside your skull? It's a myth most of us just accept without a second thought. I mean, yes, the central nervous system is encased in thick, protective bone, and obviously that bone serves a crucially important purpose. But science is actually starting to show us that assuming the skull totally seals the brain off from the physical forces of the rest of the body, well, it's actually completely wrong.
And here is the plot twist. A recent study published in the super prestigious journal Nature Neuroscience, conducted by researchers at Penn State, reveals this amazing, surprising, hydraulic connection between our abdominal muscles and our brains. Just think about that for a second. The muscles in your belly are physically connected to the movement of your brain. The researchers actually found that physical movement, specifically contracting your core, directly impacts and physically moves the brain within the skull. No way, right?
Section 1. The hydraulic belly pump. Let's just dive right into this four-step sequence because it brilliantly illustrates how the body acts like a giant, interconnected machine. Okay, step 1. Your abdominal muscles contract. This could literally be as simple as tensing your core right before you stand up. Step 2. This contraction physically squeezes blood out of your belly and forces it right into the spinal column. Step 3. That added volume of blood inside the enclosed space of the spine pushes fluid upward. And finally, step 4. This creates a literal pressure wave that physically moves the brain. Your belly is essentially acting as a human hydraulic pump.
So what makes this possible? The specific anatomical structure that makes this whole hydraulic transfer happen is called the vertebral venous plexus. Basically, it's a specialized network of veins connecting the abdominal cavity directly to the spinal cavity. Without this specific network acting as a conduit, that pressure wave wouldn't even be able to travel from your core up into your skull. This network is the literal highway for that hydraulic pressure. Moving on to Section 2, watching the brain move. So how did they figure this out? Well, to actually see this happen, researchers observed 24 awake mice walking on a spherical treadmill. By surgically implanting a special transparent window into the mice's thin skulls, they were able to use high-definition 2-photon microscopy. They were recording the brain roughly 40 times per second. And here is the absolute kicker. They used sensors to track spikes in the mice's abdominal muscle activity at the exact same time. They discovered that the brain shifted slightly forward into the side precisely in the moments right before the mouse took a step, basically right when the core muscles tightened to spur the body into motion. But, to be absolutely sure it wasn't just the leg movement causing the shift, they ran a brilliantly simple secondary experiment. They took lightly anesthetized mice and fitted them with a custom pneumatic belt. Think of it kind of like a tiny blood pressure cuff for the belly. Without the mice moving their legs at all, the researchers applied gentle, localized pressure to the abdomen. And guess what? The brains shifted, and they immediately returned to baseline when the pressure was released. This confirmed beyond a doubt that it was the belly pressure itself acting as the pump.
Let's get into Section 3, the dirty sponge analogy.
Now, modeling fluid dynamics inside the brain is incredibly complex, mostly because of all the membranes and real-world anatomy. So researcher Francesco Costanzo and his team simplified the geometry. As Costanzo explains it, the brain has a structure similar to a sponge, in the sense that you have a soft skeleton and fluid can move through it. If you picture the brain not as a solid mass, but as a soft, porous sponge with all these varied microscopic spaces and wrinkles, well, it suddenly becomes way easier to understand how fluid travels through it. And this brilliantly leads to the next part of his explanation. Keeping with the idea of the brain as a sponge, how do you clean a dirty sponge? You run it under a tap and squeeze it out. And guys, this is exactly what the hydraulic belly pump is doing. Every time your abdominal muscles contract, that pressure wave acts like a hand gently squeezing the brain sponge, inducing fluid flow over and through the tissue to help clear out all those cellular waste products. Just to be precise about what is actually being squeezed out, we are talking about interstitial fluid. This is the liquid found in the microscopic spaces around the cells within the brain tissue. When the sudden movement of the brain happens due to your core contracting, it's this specific fluid that gets forcefully pushed out of the brain tissue, carrying that cellular waste right along with it. What's really fascinating, though, is how this compares to what happens when we rest. During physical movement, that hydraulic pressure forces interstitial fluid outward from the brain tissue. But during sleep, previous studies have actually shown that fluid washes deeply inward into the brain to remove waste. So movement and sleep are essentially acting as two complementary halves of the ultimate brain cleaning cycle.
Section 4. Movement, Waste, and Health.
The implications here are just massive. This hydraulic link means that simple body movement helps cycle cerebrospinal fluid around the brain, removing harmful cellular waste products that just naturally build up over time. Because of this newly discovered mechanism may actively protect against neurodegenerative disorders, which, are often associated with waste buildup in the brain. And honestly, the best part? You don't need to go out and run a marathon. This brainwashing effect is triggered by just walking or simply engaging your core. Now, as enthusiastic as we are about all this, a good explainer always looks at the full picture, and that includes acknowledging the study's current limitations. The researchers do note that because the mice had their heads secured for the microscope, the experiments didn't account for the physical forces generated by moving the head up and down freely, which obviously adds another layer of physical complexity. Plus, the imaging was restricted to the top portion of the brain's cortex. Deeper brain regions probably experience totally different types of stretching or shifting, which is going to require more research to fully understand. Section 5. A quick note on hantavirus. Real quick, our secondary source material today simply provides a link to a separate video resource regarding the hantavirus. That specific link is just provided here for those of you reviewing all the source texts. Okay, let's bring it back and leave you with this incredibly empowering thought from Patrick Drew, the corresponding author of the Penn State study. He says, "This kind of motion is so small. It's what's generated when you walk or just contract your abdominal muscles, which you do when you engage in any physical behavior. It can make such a difference for your brain health." It is just amazing to realize that every time you stand up, take a walk, or simply tighten your core, you are literally giving your brain a healthy hydraulic squeeze. Which kind of makes you wonder, if a simple flex of your stomach is secretly washing your brain, what other incredible hidden connections is your body keeping from you? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.